travel worldwide with his insights and creativity, and his devotion to truth-seeking regarding scientific matters is our topic this evening. And so it gives me great pleasure to introduce Michael Crichton.
Thank you, David. That was very nice. I was quite impressed with myself. I'm going to try and sit tonight, if that's okay. And most people think I'm too tall already. I'm going to challenge you tonight to revise your thinking and to reconsider some fundamental assumptions. Assumptions that are so deeply embedded in our consciousness that we don't even realize that they're there. This is a map by the artist Tom Friedman. You know, I have to tell you that my favorite example of making the wrong assumption is a story about a man who goes on vacation and leaves his cat with his best friend. And he's on vacation, and the friend calls him up and says, "Listen, I got some bad news. The cat got up on the roof and we can't get it down. We called the fire department. They came. The cat jumped to a tree. They went up the tree, but anyway, the cat fell. The cat's dead." The guy said, "Oh my God!" He said, "How can you tell me in this way?" And he said, "Well, how should I have told you?" And he said, "Well, you have to prepare me." He said, "The first day you should have called and said, 'Listen, the cat's on the roof and we can't get her down.' Then the second day you call and you say, 'The fire department's here and the cat's jumped to the tree.' And the third day you call me and you say, 'The cat died,' and by then I'm prepared." And I said, "Oh, that's the way you want it?" He said, "Yes." Continues his vacation, gets a call a week later, and his friend says, "Listen, your mother's on the roof and we can't get her down." So this is a map, and the assumptions that I'm going to talk to you about today are not getting your mother down, but another kind of a map that tells us how the world works. And particularly, I would like to try and direct our attention to the notion that most people make the assumption of linearity in a world that is largely nonlinear. I hope that at the end of this talk, the meaning of that statement will be clear, but we won't be getting there in a linear fashion. Some of you know that I've written a book that many people find controversial called State of Fear. And I want to tell you how I came to write it. Because up until about 5 years ago, I had very conventional ideas about the environment and the environmental movement. This book really began, is that mine? Oh, thank you. This book really began in 1998 when I had decided to write a novel about a global disaster. That was one of the first books I'd read, and I thought, well, I'm old now, I'll write another one. And in the course of my preparation for this book, I rather casually reviewed what had happened at Chernobyl, because I regard Chernobyl as the largest man-made disaster that I knew about. What I discovered stunned me. Chernobyl was a tragic event, but nothing remotely close to the global catastrophe that I was imagining. About 50 people had died in Chernobyl, roughly the number of Americans that die every day in traffic accidents. I don't mean to be gruesome, but it was a setback for me. You can't write a novel about a global disaster in which only 50 people die. I was undaunted. I began to research other kinds of disasters that might fulfill my novelistic requirements. And that's when I began to realize how big our planet really is and how resilient its systems ordinarily seem to be. Even though I wanted to create a fictional catastrophe of global proportions, I found it hard to come up with a credible example. I couldn't actually come up with anything that I would believe. So in the end, I set the book aside and wrote something else. But the shock that I had experienced reverberated in me for a while, because what I'd been led to believe about Chernobyl was not merely wrong, it was astonishingly wrong. Let's review that for a minute. These are the low estimates of immediate Chernobyl deaths as a consequence of the actual incident. And you see here the UPI in 1986, at the time of the disaster, predicted that there would be 2,000 immediate deaths. The New York Post thought there would be 16,000. The Canadian Broadcasting Company in 91 thought there would be that many. And you see the BBC and the New York Times in 2002 predicting at the low end 15,000 deaths. Their estimates were 15,000 to 30,000 deaths. Now, there was a UN commission in 2000 that suggested that the catastrophe is nowhere near that proportion. And as you can see, the next UN commission in 2005 doesn't really show up on the graph because the total numbers are 56. Now, to report that 15 to 30,000 people are dead when the actual number is 56 represents a very large error. To get some idea of just how big, let's imagine that we lined all the victims up in a row. If 56 people are each represented by 1 foot of space, then that's probably the distance from me to about the second table here, something like that. 15,000 people is 3 miles away. It seems difficult to make a mistake of that scale. But of course, you're probably thinking we're talking about radiation, but about long-term consequences. Unfortunately for the media, their reports are even less accurate here. Here you see CNN in 1996 was predicting future Chernobyl-related illnesses and death in a large swath that would go from Sweden to the Baltic, to the Black Sea, estimating 3.5 million. The BBC, much more conservatively, estimated 50,000. Agence Presse thought 500,000. The Ukrainian Victims Group in 2002 estimated 150,000. The UN Commission in 2005 decided that there would be about 4,000. That's the number of Americans who die of adverse drug reactions in this country every 6 weeks. Again, a huge error. But most troubling of all, according to the UN report, was that the largest public health problem created by the accident was the damaging psychological impact due to a lack of accurate information. This was manifesting, as they said, as negative self-assessments of health, belief in a shortened life expectancy, lack of initiative, and dependency on assistance from the state. In other words, the greatest damage to the people of Chernobyl was caused by bad information. These people weren't blighted by radiation so much as by terrifying but false information. We ought to ponder for a minute exactly what that implies. We demand strict controls on radiation because it's such a health hazard. But clearly, Chernobyl suggests that false information can be a health hazard as damaging as radiation. I'm not saying that radiation is not a threat. I'm also not saying that Chernobyl is not a genuinely serious event. But thousands of Ukrainians who didn't die were made invalids out of fear. They were told to be afraid. They were told they were going to die when they weren't. They were told their children would be deformed when they were. They were told they couldn't have children when they could. They were authoritatively promised a future of cancer, deformities, pain, and decay. It's no wonder they responded as they did. In fact, we really need to recognize that as this kind of human response is very well documented. Authoritatively telling people they are going to die can in itself be fatal. You may know that there's an Australian Aborigine, the Aborigines fear something called pointing the bone. A shaman shakes a bone in a person, sings a song, and soon after the person dies. This is a specific example of a phenomenon generally referred to as hex death. A person is cursed by an authority figure and subsequently dies. According to medical studies, the person generally dies of dehydration, implying that they just give up. But the progression is very erratic, and shock symptoms may play a part, suggesting adrenal effects of fright and hopelessness. Yet this deadly curse is nothing but information, and it can be undone with information. A friend of mine was an intern at Bellevue Hospital in New York when a 28-year-old man from Aruba came in saying he was going to die because he'd been cursed. He was admitted for psychiatric evaluation and found to be normal, but his health steadily declined while he was in the hospital. My friend was able to rehydrate him, balance his electrolytes, and give him nutrients, but nevertheless the man worsened. He insisted that he was cursed and that nothing could be done to prevent his death. My friend realized that this patient would, in fact, soon die. The situation was desperate. Finally, he told the patient that he, the doctor, was going to invoke his own powerful medicine to undo the curse, and his medicine was more powerful than any other. He then got together with the house staff, bought some headdresses and rattles, and danced around the patient in the middle of the night, chanting what they hoped would be effective-sounding phrases. I think several of them were trying to remember their bar mitzvah. The patient showed no reaction, but the next day he began to improve. He went home a few days later, and I would say that my friend literally saved his life. This suggests that Ukrainian invalids are not unique in their response, but that the large numbers of what we might call information casualties represent a particularly egregious example of what can happen from false fears.